I'd like to introduce you today to the idea of the many parts of the human. Some people refer to this concept as the many parts of the soul, but that can be misleading since one of the parts that we're talking about is named the soul. If you do an internet search on the different parts of the human, one of the first references that you'll find will be to the first letter to the Thessalonians, chapter 5, verse 23, right here. And the very God of peace sanctify you wholly. And I pray God your whole spirit and soul and body be preserved blameless unto the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. Hundreds upon hundreds of Christian websites will define the human as a tripartite entity with the spirit at the center. And the spirit is the immortal part of the human. It is the essence, the divine spark, which is eternal. Then the soul, which seems to have a lot more to do with mind. This is where emotions, desires, thoughts, and plans reside. And then there's the body, which is the physical manifest part of the human. The body is absolutely mortal. The spirit is absolutely immortal. And the soul appears to be mortal but able to be turned immortal. And Christian theology is about attaching the soul to an outside agent so that it will not die with the body, but rather go on with the spirit after death. Now that can be taken literally to the word, but I do have a little problem with it, is that the word spirit and the word soul have different origins. Spirit comes from the Latin spiritus, which means breath, and soul comes from the Germanic soul, which is defined as the unmanifest spiritual part of a human or animal. And so they work okay as words to define two different parts of the human, but because of their origins, they can be confused for each other, and very often are. Which brings me to the Egyptian version. The Egyptians had a 5-part soul, including the Ren, which is the person's name, which was understood to be a part of that person. The Shut, which was the person's shadow, which was also understood to be a part of that person. The Ib was the heart of that person, which was understood to include emotions, desires, and thoughts. The Ba, which is the personality of that person, which makes them different from anyone else. And then the Ka, the vital fire, which differentiates them from a dead being. And then we have the Kabbalistic understanding of the different parts of the human soul. We have, first of all, the Nefesh, which is the physical body. Then we have the Ruach, which is supposed to be the internal manifestations of the human, so the thoughts, the emotions, and so on. Then we have the Neshama, which is all of the spiritual aspects of the person. And then we have the Chaya, which is the divine spark. So those are the 4 parts of the human, but there is a 5th part called the Yehida, which resides before everything else. It's the potential for everything that comes after it. It's the most intangible part and very difficult to describe. I'll just represent it with a dash, because it's just too abstract for human words. Now these 4 parts, Chaya, Neshama, Ruach, and Nefesh, are represented by the 4 elements. Chaya being fire, Neshama being water, Ruach being air, and Nefesh being earth. They're also represented by the Hebrew letters Yod, He, Vav, and He final. But once again, you'll notice that this Yechida is all alone. Well, this is where the pentagram comes in. As you know, the pentagram is a 5-pointed star, and each point represents an element. But there aren't 5 elements, there are only 4 elements. The 5th is spirit. This one over here is earth. This one over here is air. This up here is fire, and this down here is water. And up here you have spirit. That is why a pentagram should always be represented with a point upwards to represent spirit above all other elements. And the opposite with the point facing downwards is an infernal symbol, saying that the 4 elements have supremacy over spirit. The final tradition that I'd like to talk about would be the alchemical tradition, with salt representing the body, Mercury representing the feminine aspect of the soul, and sulfur representing the masculine aspect of the soul. What's interesting is that we have Mercury being wet and cold, just like water, and sulfur being hot and dry, just like fire. And so you have 2 aspects of the soul, the masculine aspect and the feminine aspect. So here you have the animus, and here we have the anima. And here the salt, representing body, is the part of the human which is purified by the other 2. This seems to be a simplification of Nefesh and whatever comes above it. Ruach being maybe feminine, maybe Ruach and Neshama being feminine, and Chaya being the divine spark, that fire of the Yod. But also we see a direct link to the Christian tradition with these 3 parts: the body, the soul, and the spirit. There you can see that here they are distinct parts, whereas you can see that over here one part depends on the other. So that's all I have for you today. If you have any thoughts about it, please leave your comments down below. Please remember that we're ultimately talking about language describing things that language weren't designed to describe. Human language was designed to describe the physical world, and we're using it as best we can to describe the immaterial world. And so one person's spiritus is going to be another person's sewel. But at least with these basics, you will know what to research next. Thanks ever so much for watching the video. Please remember to leave a thumbs up and to subscribe down below, and see you very soon.